Jamie. Jamie looked down as John took in the cheers from the crowd. He had won. He had actually won. As much as he hoped he would, believed he would. When he saw the Royce lad fight, Jamie had thought it would be a step too far for John at this time. He had been surprised during the duels that John was wielding a normal tourney sword. He had thought it odd, as he knew John was much better with a thinner blade. But as he watched John beat his opponents, he had come to the conclusion that maybe he wasn't comfortable enough with the thin blade just yet. How wrong he was. John had been playing them all along, and Jamie felt an enormous amount of pride that the lessons he had with the boy had yielded such incredible results. When he brought the thin blade out to face Royce, Jamie had been confused, though. If he wasn't comfortable then, what was he doing with it now? He had thought he didn't have long to wait for the answer. John had been magnificent. His speed, his movement, all of it had been enhanced, using the thinner, lighter blade, and the Royce boy didn't know what hit him. It was over so quickly that even Jamie wasn't sure he'd seen what he had. The move John had used was one he hadn't taught him, but he had seen it before, and he smiled and wondered if the gods were watching. "Did you see that?" he heard a voice to his left say. "I've never seen anything like that before," another voice said. "Bite, how was he so quick?" Yet another. Jimmy smiled as he heard the voices speak about his king, how they praised the boy and compared him to other great swordsmen. Arthur Dane, reborn, he's another Barristan the Bold. You can see he's been trained by Lord Jamie, all variations on the same theme. John had done what he wanted him to do. He'd made a name for himself here today. Sir Wylus. Wylus really looked forward to the duels. They were something he'd never seen done before, and for him that gave him a reason to watch them. The fact his squire and his liege lord's son were both competing just added to his interest. Jon Snow was not like he'd expected him to be. He had met the boy a few times, when he and his father had made their visits to Winterfell. There the boy was quiet and carried himself as if he thought that at any minute someone would object to his presence, something his father Wyman had commented on, and while they were there had insisted on the boy being placed at the high table, as any son of a Stark should be. Wylus admired his father for that. There were those who looked down on bastards, but not his father. His father treated everyone the same. A good man is a good man, Wylus, regardless which side of the sheets they were born on, and mark my words, that lad will grow up to be a good man. His father had said when he asked him about the young Jon Snow. But here, Jon Snow didn't carry himself like that scared boy he'd met at Winterfell. He strolled around, easy to smile, and not afraid to point out where he thought you were making a mistake. He'd shamed him at the meeting and had done it because it was right, and he had been acting a fool. The deal he'd agreed, which he knew his father would be happy with, would make House Manderley a lot of coin, and in the end, he had Jon Snow to thank for it. As the duels took place, he almost wished he was a boy again. He'd have loved to take part in a competition like this one. He saw Jorah was as enraptured as he was. Ardos was no match for Jon Snow, but then neither was anyone else, as soon became clear, and as the young lad beat all his opponents, he felt a sense of pride in his lieges. Son, he was representing the North and showing these Southerners what everyone in the North already knew. A wolf was not to be taken lightly. The lad's doing well, Jorah? Aye. He may have trouble with the Royce lad or the Tyrell, though. Wylus didn't think so, and soon he was proved right. The boy easily beat the Tyrell. He almost looked to be playing with him to Wylus's eye, but it was the final that showed just how good the boy really was. Neither Wylus nor Jorah had ever seen anything like it. How quickly he moved, how soon it was over, caught them both by surprise. "Did you see that, Jorah?" Wylus said, smiling as he turned to the man he had become quite friendly with. "Aye, not sure I believe it though," Jorah replied. And Wylus noticed he too had a smile on his face. The king. Robert sat there stunned. By his own standards, he was sober. Others would call him drunk. But Robert had taken it easier today. He'd been enjoying the duels, and while he never admitted out loud, it was a damn fine idea the Kingslayer had come up with. Watching the boys fight brought him back to his time at the Vale. he and Ned taking on all comers in the yard, he with his hammer and Ned with his trusty longsword. The skill of some of the lads surprised him. The young Royce lad had obviously inherited his father's talent, and the young flower from the Reach was quite good, though a little too flashy for Robert's taste. But it was Ned's lad that had him gripped all through the event. The way he moved, how quick he was with his attacks, was something he relished seeing for himself. When the boy had beaten the dragon seed, Robert had cheered as loudly as he had when he'd killed Rhaegar, the boy's silver hair reminding him of that accursed dragon spawn. But he'd been no match for Ned's boy, and Robert celebrated the victory as if it was him who'd won. He tuned to Jon Arryn to see he too was engrossed in the fight. "Did you see that, Jon? Did you see Ned's boy?" "Aye, Your Grace. I did. The boy is his father's son, although I don't think even Ned was that good at that age." "He damn well wasn't," the king said, laughing. The next matches went by fast, and Robert, while enjoying them, was waiting for Ned's boy to come out again. When he did, it was to face one of his bannermen. The young Stormland's lord would, on another occasion, have had Robert's favor, but here he was facing his brother's son. Ned was the brother he chose, and his son would have his favor. Damn anyone who thought otherwise. He watched as Lord Beric was soundly beaten and couldn't help but smile, his drink all but forgotten while he'd been watching the two boys fight. Beric was skilled, but Ned's boy was better, and Robert wished his friend was here with him to watch it. That was how it was supposed to be. Ned sitting here beside Robert and Lyanna, he and Ned laughing and joking while watching his lad beat them all. He reached over and grabbed his tankard, swallowing its contents in one gulp, before motioning for it to be refilled, his thoughts filled with the loss of his love and the absence of his friend. The bouts continued, and Robert paid them little mind, until suddenly he was there again, this time fighting the flower. He pushed his squire away when he wanted to refill his tankard, and tuned to speak to Jon Arryn again. "This should be good, eh, Jon?" he said with a large grin. "Aye, Your Grace. Young Loras is very skilled. His father speaks very highly of him. Who cares about the damn rose? Jon, Ned's boy, will beat him, mark my words," he said loudly, causing a nearby Mace Tyrell to grow red in the face. He was right, though. Ned's boy had shown that roses are no match for wolves. And Robert laughed loudly at it. He looked down at the Tyrells. Mace was flushed and shaking his head, his mother sitting there with her usual scowl. "Serves you right for supporting the damn dragon spawn. That's what happens. A wolf comes down and pisses over your damn flowers," he thought, and laughed again. As he watched the final, he was actually nervous. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this way. He watched as the two boys faced off. Jon would be happy, he thought, seeing a representative of the Vale in this fight. The other lad was much bigger than Ned's boy and seemed to be laughing at him. The nerve of him. He's lucky Ned's not here. I'd not tolerate my brother's son disrespected in his presence. He noticed the sword in the boy's hand, a thin blade. What was he thinking? He wanted to shout down to the lad, to tell him he had the wrong blade. But before he got the chance to, the fight had begun. As quickly as it had, it was over, and Robert was shocked. Like most of the crowd, the boy had moved so fast, the blade barely seen in the air. And then in seconds it was over, and not content with winning, the boy had made the other lad yield. "Did you see that, Jon? Did you damn well see that?" The king shouted loudly. "Aye, Your Grace. I did," Jon Arryn replied. "Oh, if only Ned was here to see his boy, Jon, he'd be so proud of him. I want to talk to the lad." "Of course, Your Grace. I'll arrange it for later," Jon Arryn said exasperatedly. "No, Jon. I want to see Ned's boy now. His king wishes to reward him." Robert set a large smile on his face. Marjorie. The duels were everything she'd hoped they'd be. It was so different to watch boys her age fight in a competition. In Highgarden, she'd watch her brothers spar, and while it was entertaining and she and her friends would enjoy it, she always knew it was almost playing with swords. They trained and they played, her grandmother would say, and Marjorie had agreed with her. But this was different. The way they moved and fought was so much more intense than they did when they sparred, and Marjorie felt her excitement rise with each bout. She cheered her brother on and was so proud of him as he won fight after fight. But what surprised her was how much she looked forward to watching Jon fight. Each time he came out, she felt herself edge forward in her seat. She felt her palms sweat just a little, and her heart would beat a little faster. Watching him fight was something special. He made it look easy as he moved so well, so gracefully, that he made it look like an art. And Marjorie wondered if he danced that well also. When it came time to watch him face Loras, it caused her to worry for them both. Please don't hurt each other, she thought as she watched them face off. Each blow that landed was one she almost felt herself. She watched as Garland moved in his own seat, as if he was actually out there fighting also. As the two blades met in the air, she sat there hoping that whichever of them won, they'd still be friendly at the end. She had been upset to see that some of the boys seemed to take a loss so badly and hoped that Loras or Jon would show her how a true knight would react, because to her, that's what they were, true knights, chivalrous, polite, and friendly. Finally, Jon got the win and Loras shook his hand and her heart pounded in her chest. She looked to see Garland give Jon a respectful nod, and as she looked at the dark-haired boy, she couldn't stop the grin from appearing on her face. As she watched Jon and her brother walk from the field, she was happy to see both boys laughing and joking with each other. She turned to Garland as two boys from the Vale made their way out to begin their fight. "Well, sis, what did you think, Loras? Did well, didn't he?" Garland said, smiling. "He did. If he'd have faced anyone other than Jon, he'd have won. Probably. Though he had no chance against Jon, the boy is much better than him. He scored 3 points. Gar, on another day he may have beaten him," Marjorie said indignantly, sticking up for her brother. "Perhaps. It doesn't matter. Anyway, at least we have someone to cheer in the final." "Do you think Jon can win?" Marjorie asked, a note of concern in her voice. "I don't know. Jon's good, but I think Robar may edge him," Garland said, drawing her attention to the fight below. After she watched Robar win, Marjorie had to agree with him. Robar had Jon beat in terms of strength and size and was very skilled. She didn't think Loras would be able to beat him, and Jon had only just beaten Loras. As the two boys left the field, she and Garland were joined by Loras. She smiled at him and moved closer to him as he sat down. "You were great, Loras. I'm so proud of you," she said, hugging her brother tightly. "Aye, you were really good, Loras. It just wasn't your day," Garland said, patting Loras' shoulder. "Jon was better today. It's no shame to have lost to him," Loras said with a smile that warmed her heart. The three siblings sat there waiting for the final to begin. After the two boys were introduced, she looked down at Jon. He looked determined, and she waved and wished him good fortune, smiling as he waved back at her. She sent a prayer to the warrior that he'd win. She looked to see her brothers both sitting there with frowns on their faces. "What's wrong?" she asked worriedly. "What's he thinking?" Garland said. "I don't know," Loras replied. "What is it? What's wrong?" Marjorie said, her voice full of worry now. "The sword. Marge, look at his sword," Loras said as she tuned to see what it was they were on about. Jon's sword was thinner than normal, but she couldn't see how that would be a problem. "What's wrong with the sword? Is it too thin?" she asked. I don't know what he's thinking of. He'll be lucky to block anything with that," Loras said, shaking his head. Marjorie watched on nervously as the fight began. She hoped Jon wouldn't be hurt. She felt herself grab the edge of her seat when Robar's blade struck. What she saw next, though, left her amazed. She knew Jon was fast, but suddenly he was a blur. Before she had time to see where he was moving to, it was all over. He'd won. He'd actually won, and done so quicker than anyone had in any of the duels so far. She found herself cheering loudly along with the crowd, Loras and Garland looking on with shocked faces. Gerion could barely keep Joy still in his arms when she saw Jon come out for his duels. His daughter bounced excitedly and kept pointing and saying his name. It made Gerion smile to see her so happy. When Jaime had brought the northern boy back with him as his page, he hadn't known what to think. If it had been Tywin who'd done so, he'd have thought it was some kind of power play. But that wasn't his nephew's style. So he'd gone along with it and decided to give the boy the benefit of the doubt. The fact of him being a bastard didn't bother him like it did his brother. But then again, the more time he'd spent around the boy, the more he liked him. John was a modest boy, who while initially closed off was a completely different person once you got to know him. But it was seeing John with Joy that completely won him over. The boy went out of his way to spend time with his little girl. He read stories to her, he played with her, took her for little walks around the rock, broke his fast with her, and had meals with her whenever he had the chance. His daughter adored him. He could see it in her face every time he saw them together. But it wasn't just the fact John spent time with her. It was that he did it for no reason other than he wanted to. He had told him time and time again he didn't need to. But John wouldn't hear of it. If he had a free moment and Joy was awake there, he'd be playing with her or taking her on one of their little adventures, as he had heard John call their walks. His daughter had come on so much. Gone was the shy little girl she had been. And just like John himself, she too was more open and outspoken, and he found he loved the boy a little for that. "John," his daughter said, and Gerion looked to see John about to face off against a northern lad. As he did, he saw John wave to his daughter. "Wave at John, Joy." He said, "Yawn," she shouted as he held her hand and waved. The fight began, and Gerion watched as John took a hard knock to his shoulder. "Yan boo-boo," Joy said as she saw the hit landing. "What's that, princess?" "Yan boo-boo," Joy said sadly. "We'll kiss it better for him then, won't we, princess?" "Beller," Joy said and smiled. Gerion couldn't help but laugh, but his laugh soon died as he saw Meryn Trant glower at him. In Joy, he had heard what happened and how John had stuck up for his girl and even thought Jaime had punched the idiot and had him removed from the rock. For Gerion, this wasn't enough. If he thought his white cloak was protection, then he knew nothing about how far a father would go for his daughter. Before he could let the thoughts get the better of him, he heard the crowd cheer and looked as John won yet again. He and Joy enjoyed the rest of the duels, his daughter growing more and more excited each time John came out. It was incredible to him how quickly she would recognize it was John, from where they were sitting to where the boys came out. Must have been the length of 2 tilt yards at least. And yet as soon as John walked through the entrance, his daughter would say his name, making Tyrion and Jaime laugh beside him. When John beat the Tyrell lad, Joy had waved all on her own, and Gerion had sat there waving along with her, a huge grin on his face as John waved back at them before waving at someone else in the crowd. Gerion looked to see Lord Tyrell's daughter wave at him, a small blush appearing on her face before she turned and waved at Joy, making her laugh excitedly. The final was like nothing he'd ever expected. He had thought John would have his work with the Royce lad and had expected it to be a tough fight, but the reality was something different altogether. John was amazing. He moved so fast it was over before it had even begun. Joy, who had been bouncing excitedly on his knee from the moment that John came out, was finally relaxing, almost like she too was in as much shock as everyone else. Barristan enjoyed the duels immensely. The level of talent was surprising, and if he had been watching it as a Kingsguard, he'd probably have been evaluating like Sir Gerald used to do with every tourney. Even though these boys were years away from ever being Kingsguards, he knew his old commander treated every contest as a potential recruiting opportunity. If someone did exceptionally well or showed talent in a melee, then Gerald would take note of them and keep them in mind for later. But Barristan hadn't been watching the duels as a Kingsguard. He'd been watching it to see the young lad in action, and he had been left breathless of what he'd seen. Jon Snow fought like his father. He evaluated and waited for opportunities. He took advantage of any shown weaknesses and laid traps for people to fall into. But even Rhaegar had never had that much skill. With him, it had been his will and desire to be a swordsman that shone through. With his son, it was his natural talent. He could see some of Jaime's training shine through, and the boy's fundamentals were sound. But no matter how well trained you are, if you didn't have a natural talent, then you were limited to how good you could be. Jon Snow, to his trained eye, had no limit. With the right training, there was no telling just how good he could be. Combined with the boy's speed, and Barristan felt that when he was ready, neither he or Jaime Lannister could match him. Apart from Arthur, he didn't think anyone would be even close. What had surprised him most watching the lad was that he didn't limit himself to one style. Like most of the others, the Royce lad was an impressive swordsman, but he fought one way only, and when he faced Jon Snow, he was dismantled. The quickness of the bout had stunned the crowd and Barristan himself. But perhaps no one was more shocked than the Royce lad. Even now, as he watched the boys sit down, he could see the disbelief in his face. Barristan made his way to where Jon was standing with Sir Adam and some of the other lords of the West, all of them congratulating the boy who stood there laughing and shaking his head. He wished he could leave the boy to enjoy their praises, but the king wished to see him before the prize giving, so he was sent to fetch the lad. "Jon Snow," Barristan said as he reached the group. "Yes," Jon said, turning. "Please forgive me, Sir Barristan." He quickly added when he saw him, "Nothing to forgive, lad," Barristan said with a smile. "The king wishes to see you, Jon. Would you come with me?" "The king, sir? Why?" "He wishes to reward you for your victory, lad." "There is no need, sir. I'm getting the winner's purse. That's reward enough," Jon said, looking down at his feet. "No, lad, you deserve much more," Barristan said softly. Barristan said softly, "Come, Jon. The king's not a patient man," he quickly added. He watched as Jon said his farewells to the lords and Sir Adam. Then he and the boy made their way back into the arena to where the king was waiting. "You were very impressive, lad. Very impressive indeed. Who taught you to fight like that?" Barristan asked. "I learned the basics with Sir Roderick Cassell in Winterfell, sir, but I've been training with Lord Jaime since I became his page." "Well, Jon, you did them both proud. I'm sure your father would be also." "Thank you, Sir Barristan, though father would never have wanted me to compete in a tourney," Jon said with a note of sadness. "Oh, why's that, Jon?" "Father thinks tourney's a waste of time, Sir Barristan. He thinks you should never show an opponent how skilled you are." While I understand the reasoning, Jon, I have to disagree with Lord Stark on this one," Barristan said. "Sometimes showing someone how good you are, Jon, is more important than not. Do you think more people or less people wish to cross blades with me because I compete in tourneys? But you're Barristan the Bold. You killed Maelis the Monstrous. You're a living legend, sir." "Which stops a lot of fights before they begin, Jon. While Lord Stark is right to an extent about not showing off your skill. At the end of the day, an opponent knowing or not knowing how good you are only gets you so far. In the end, if he's more skilled than you, he'll beat you more times than not, whether he's seen you fight beforehand." He watched as the boy nodded his head. It was a lesson he hoped he'd take to heart. Lord Stark's dislike of tourneys was well known, and while, as he told Jon, there was some merit in the argument, the truth was in battle. It made no difference. Skill and luck trumped knowing how an opponent may fight. It was far better to be feared than to be unexpected. People in a battle stayed away from the man they feared. Cersei couldn't believe the bastard won. She was sure he'd be beaten by a trueborn sooner or later, but round after round he kept winning. Her husband was falling in love with the boy. He was his best friend come again, according to him, although Cersei didn't see it at all. Ned Stark was a dour, dull man. His bastard was much more outgoing, and he even smiled, something his father never did. It was even a nice smile, despite it being on a bastard's face. The boy would grow up to be a good-looking lad, and with a smile like that, he'd have no shortage of girls willing to give him a bastard or two of his own. But he'd aggravated her and annoyed her, and now with her husband falling for him, no, she won't have it. Something would need to be done. Why, if no one put the bastard in his place now, then who knows which of his betters he'd try to beat later. As she watched the bastard beat the Royce boy, she fumed. Who does he think he is? When she heard her husband order Sir Barristan to fetch him so he could be rewarded, she snapped. "No, I will not have it. He will not be presented in front of the king and queen. That was just too much." But what to do, what to say? Robert had already admonished her over Trant. How could she do this, she wondered. Robert, my love, surely that can wait. We do have a feast to go to, and Joffrey's tired, she said in her sweetest voice while holding on to her son. I wish to reward Ned's lad, woman, the boy just won. A damn tourney, the damn feast can wait, Robert angrily said. But Robert, perhaps at the feast itself would be a better time to reward the bastard, she whined. He's Ned's lad, and I'll reward him when I damn well choose, and I choose now. Robert growled at her. She pouted and turned away from him. The damn bastard was causing her nothing but grief. No, this will not stand. A few moments later, Sir Barristan arrived with the bastard, and she watched as he got down on one knee before her. And her husband, the boy at least had the good grace to keep his eyes to the ground and didn't dare look her in the face. Rise, lad, Robert said, and she could see he was smiling. Your grace, your grace. The bastard aide bowing to them both. You were magnificent out there, lad, just like your father. That move, though, at the end, that was something else. Where did you learn that? Robert asked. Thank you, your grace. I didn't learn it. It was just something I thought might work. The bastard said humbly, annoying her. Gods, how does Jaime put up with him? Well, it was impressive, lad. Was it not, John? Aye, your grace. It was a fine performance young Snow gave. John Arryn's weaselly voice gratingly replied, Well, lad, your king wishes to reward it, so name it. What is it your wish for? Her husband asked. Your grace, there's no need, no reward is necessary, the bastard said, and she smiled smugly. See, he wants nothing to do with you, just like his father. Just like Ned you are, humble even when you shouldn't be, Robert said with a grin. I'll tell you what, lad, I'd give you your name if your father asked. But since he won't, how about a blade or a horse? Or I'll match the purse you won. But your king's wishes to reward you, and reward you he shall. Robert said, stunning her in the bastard. He'd legitimize him. Him a bastard. He'd legitimize him. She was apoplectic. Your grace, it's too early for me to get a proper blade, and I've no real use for coin. So if it pleases your grace, then I'll take the horse. Very well, lad. John will see to it. Now go prepare for the feast. There's no better feeling in the world than feasting after you've won a fight, well apart from fucking after one. But you're too young for that. She heard her husband laugh loudly as she, John Arryn, and Sir Barristan looked on shocked by what he said. The feast, John. The closing feast for the tourney was done differently. Instead of being held in Casterly Rock, it was held in Lannisport itself. The large hall of Lord Kevin's private residence was just as big as the one in the Rock, and it allowed for people who weren't staying at the Rock to be able to feast longer. John had actually been late to the feast, as he had spent some time with Joy and had stopped off at the other feast, which was going on in the town. Jaime had Tyrion organize a large outdoor feast for all of the workers who helped with the building work, and ensured the tourney went off without a hitch. John, who knew some of them, had decided to drop by, and he, along with the Lears and Jorahs, had ended up staying there longer than they'd anticipated. Most of the workers had watched the duels earlier, and John had ended up being welcomed enthusiastically. By the time he'd arrived, the feast was in full swing. At the high table, Jaime had given pride of place to his Uncle Kevin, and had taken a lower seat than he, as Lord and Warden, should. Kevin now, though, was stuck closer to the king and had to watch as he continued on in his usual behavior. Not a serving girl managed to leave a dish or fill a glass before the king had groped her, and John looked on in disgust as he watched him fondle a girl's breasts openly. John's seat at the lower table had been given away, by Kevin, no doubt, John thought, as he watched some of the Vale lads try to engage Marjorie in conversation. Not that they were having much look, polite though she was. She looked incredibly bored, and both Garland and Loras were staring at one blonde lad in particular. John and his guards took a seat nearer the back of the hall alongside some of the boys who'd competed earlier. Ah, here he is, lads, the champion, Artos said as he smiled at him. I got lucky, John said humbly. Nah, you deserved it. That final was something else, Artos said while some of the other boys nodded. "Where did you learn how to move like that?" David Rivers asked, the young Riverland squire having made it to the third round. "Lord Jamie taught me some exercises that help with movement." John replied, "Show us," a couple of the boys asked. So John got up and walked them through the movements. By the time he was done, there were almost 20 of the boys who competed that day practicing them. As they were doing the moves, Loras and his brother came over and stood there watching. Loras' feet moving into some of the stances John was showing off. When he noticed them, he finished and said goodbye to the boys before heading over to where Loras and Garland were standing. "John, they your fans?" Loras japed as both he and John laughed. "No, just some of the lads who didn't get as far as we did, looking for some pointers. Perhaps you can give Loras some." Garland said, smirking. "I don't need," Loras began before his brother broke out laughing. "So easy," Garland said as Loras looked on with an annoyed look on his face, before John bumped his shoulder and both boys pushed Garland, nearly making him fall. All three spent the next hour messing around and making japes at each other before things calmed down as Marjorie arrived. "Lady Marjorie," John said formally as the other two boys giggled. "What did I tell you, just John?" The girl smirked. "Sorry, just Marjorie," John said as they laughed. "I thought you may not be coming," Marjorie said, a little put out. "I arrived late. I was at the other feast." "The other feast?" Marjorie looked at him confusedly. "Aye, the one for the workers and the townspeople," John said, smiling. "We should have gone to that one," Marjorie said as both Loras and Garland agreed. "Why, this one no fun without me," John joked. "Oh no, it was a nightmare. I'm so glad a gallant knight such as yourself came to save us all from the annoying boys of the Vale," Marjorie said in an over-exaggerated swoon, making all of them burst out laughing. Jamie sat with his brother and uncle and was actually enjoying himself at one of these things. For once, today had been incredible. The event had been really well received, and he had no doubt there would be squire dueling at every tourney from now on. John had been really well received, and the crowd had cheered so loudly when he won that Jamie had felt sorry for his niece, although the little girl didn't seem to mind. He had been nervous when the king asked for John to be brought to him. When he mentioned giving him a name, he had almost jumped from his seat. But John had handled it perfectly. He knew why he refused the sword and the coin. He had no use for the latter, and he would get the former when he earned it. And Jamie knew he wished it to come from him and not the king, which made him enormously proud of him. As he looked out on the hall, he saw John with the Tyrells laughing and joking. The young Tyrell girl and he seemingly being the main instigators of most of the japes. He smiled and turned to see whether Olenna had noticed. Luckily, she was in deep conversation with Lord Aaron and hadn't seen what her grandchildren were doing. John had pulled his strikes during the duel with the Tyrell lad, and as he watched all four of them laughing, he could see why. He would bring it up with him, but wouldn't over-chastise the boy. He'd at times done the same in his early spars with Adam, so he could understand burgeoning friendships. He turned to speak to Tyrion, who was drinking with his uncle only to be interrupted by someone who had barely spoken to him for years. "Lord Jamie, I was wondering if I may have a word," Sir Barristan said as he looked at him. "Of course, sir." "Here, or would you like to go somewhere else?" he replied. "I think it's better if we speak in private. It's about Sir Meryn," Barristan answered. He nodded to his uncle and brother, and he and Barristan made their way out from the hall. They were about to enter a small side room when Sir Barristan put his hand on his arm and stopped him, before turning around to look up and down the corridor. "I think we need somewhere more private, Lord Jamie. It's not Meryn I wish to speak to you about. It's Jon Snow." Jamie gulped. "He knows," he thought. He nodded, and the two walked out of the building and down into the small garden around the back. He checked his tunic and felt the dagger he carried was safely inside. If it came to it, he'd have no problem using it. He had put his king at risk. It was his job to fix it. "You know," Jamie said when they reached the garden. "Aye, I do. So now what?" Jamie asked. "My sword is yours, Lord Jamie." Jamie looked at Barristan incredulously. Was he really saying what he thought he was saying? If so, This was a boon he had not expected, but he had to be sure. He couldn't take the chance that Barristan's honor would preclude what needed to be done. Sir Barristan, you pledged yourself to Robert. You know what I'll have to do. I know, Jaime, but what I saw today, I saw something special, Jaime. Not just in the duels, but after it. How he acts, how he is with people. He's his father's son, Jaime. He's everything he was, the prince that was promised. No, Sir Barristan, not a prince, a king.